So before we go deep into this, so when we think about the website, I want to call out that it's different from marketing. The role of marketing, the way I see it, is to increase awareness of your product, your business, and to drive traffic to your sales channel, which in this case is your website. It sets expectations for your consumer. It's like, what should they expect when they visit your website? And in some cases, marketing can be useful in terms of bringing customers back to your website, back to your store, back to your experience. And I'm going to explain what that means in a few minutes. What is the role of your website then? The website's role is then to meet those expectations that marketing sets. It is supposed to engage your customer, accelerate their purchase journey, as well as drive that loyalty that gets them coming back and buying more and more from your website. So let's dig into this a little bit. Before we did that though, it's a quick round of introductions. Sula gave a little bit of background. My name's Navneet Chajar. I go by Nav just because it's easier. It's harder to butcher. I'm currently a growth marketer at Loblaw Digital, but before that, I spent 8 years at Facebook, Salesforce, and then before that, I used to be a developer. And I've seen firsthand the process of developing a website from scratch, like a transactional website, but also how to ensure that the website is more than just code. It solves for a business problem and helps grow the business, what it's meant to do. So with that, and without further ado, let's delve into my top 10 tips to gain a competitive edge. As I'm talking, just a quick housekeeping note, we will have time for questions at the end, but if there is something that pops up and you want to know the answer right away, please pop your question in the chat. And Sula, if a question does come up, please come off mute and let me know, because I actually, as I'm presenting, I can't even see the chat or anybody's face. So.
Will do.
Thank you. All right, top 10 tips. I'm going with the bottom to top. So we'll start with number 10. The first thing you want to do as you're thinking of building a website is to invest in the infrastructure that will support the website. What do you mean by infrastructure? This is the technical pieces that make your website possible. So deciding on which server to use, or if you want to do a Shopify-based website or a WordPress website, or which plugins to use. All of those are all part of your infrastructure. And the areas you want to look for when you're selecting that infrastructure to use is, now, of course, number one, reliability. You don't want your website going down mid-transaction for a customer. Feature sets. So there are certain providers that are more feature-rich than others. For example, Shopify gives you an end-to-end website that you can build literally by plugging in a few things and filling out a form or two. Whereas the other websites like BigCommerce or WordPress gives you a lot more flexibility, and there's a lot of additional features that you would need to add on. But the features have to be available. So look at the feature set that's available for the provider you choose. The next thing you want to look at is integrations. Who does your provider integrate with? And this integration can be as simple as ensuring that there is a payment provider built in. So, for example, Square, which some of you might use as your payment service, does offer an ability to build an e-commerce website as well. And they have a built-in integration to a payment provider. Shopify has a built-in integration to a payment provider. WordPress or Wix, you could incorporate many different payment providers. That's where the integration piece comes in. Customer service, of course. You want your website provider to be there should something happen, should things go down. You want to have that customer service available. Security. You don't want your website hacked. And with a provider, you're not hosting the website, your provider is hosting it for you. So you want to make sure that their security system is top notch and they've got a good record of not having been hacked. Next is scalability. And this actually ties very neatly into pricing and plans. Scalability is based on how much bandwidth your provider is able to provide to you. There's certain providers that will have limitations in terms of how many concurrent sessions are, which is how many people can be on your website at any given time, how much data they can transfer back and forth. Whereas, other providers, basically your larger, your bigger ones, will have a higher ceiling or higher threshold for scalability. And then the last piece is on pricing and plans. I mean, this is the main thing. You get what you pay for. So be careful. Don't go for the cheapest one. I'm not saying the cheapest one is not the right one for you, but for the most part, as the adage goes, you get what you pay for. And these are some of the popular providers that I personally have had experience with half of these, and I found them all to be relatively dependable, or they've been referred to me as being reliable and worth the investment. We'll share these slides after, or there's a recording that I believe Sudha will share out after, so you can review these in more detail. Moving on to tip number 9. We built for mobile. You'll see in this graph, mobile share of website of internet traffic really has been growing continuously since mobile internet first launched back in 2011. And since 2017, more than 50% of mobile traffic is, or internet traffic actually, is mobile. And this actually excludes tablets. So this is just your cell phones. Also, I will also point out that this graph represents all mobile traffic. But when we look at just shopping traffic or sort of impulse-based or intent-based shopping, that is not, let's say, work-related internet traffic, mobile actually index is much higher. So in the US, that number is closer to about 70% of shopping e-commerce traffic is now mobile. Another thing to note, one of the other reasons why you should always build for mobile is Google, since about 2015, has ranked mobile-friendly sites much higher than desktop-only sites. So definitely something to think about, or actually not even think about, do. Build for mobile, always first. And when we think about building for mobile, there's 2 ways you approach this. The first one is this concept of adaptive design, where you have a website and the website looks and feels differently based on the device you're viewing it on. So the way your website looks on desktop is slightly different than what it looks like on your cell phone or on your tablet. Easy example for this is Amazon. Amazon on your desktop looks very different than Amazon on your cell phone. It's an example of an adaptive design where the website itself is essentially 3 different websites. There's a different website for your desktop, there's a different website for your tablet, and a different website for your mobile. Generally, this approach is used when you already have an existing website that is harder to retrofit or into a mobile device. So what you're really doing is you are doing the retrofit. You're taking all the components of that website, building a mobile version of that site. And when somebody comes to your website, your server, you build some logic into your website code. And we'll go over all of this when we go through the course. There's a piece of code that tells the server which website version to send to the customer that's asking for your website. Easy way to tell when something has an adaptive design, look for m dot in the URL. So m.facebook.com, that's an adaptive design for www.facebook.com. Although Facebook now has actually moved into what we call responsive design. So responsive design is actually fluid. and it adapts to the size of the screen no matter what the target device is. Most sites that are built through templates, like sites built on WordPress, Shopify, Wix, Square even, they're all building responsive first, just because it's a lot easier to maintain, right? You're building one version of the site. You check it on the different devices to make sure it renders cleanly. But it's the same, your one website works for everything. It also is future-proof in terms of, as device sizes change, responsive designs adapts a lot better. Also, I mean, there's pros and cons to both, though, right? Adaptive, you get a lot more control with adaptive because there are generally about three major device types, right? There's the desktop, the tablet, and the mobile phone. Building an adaptive site, you're building three websites. You have absolute control down to the pixel level on how big everything is, how much space it takes up on the screen, and you get that control. Whereas with responsive design, it scales with the size of the screen, and not all the scaling is desirable. Certain images could get rendered so small that they aren't as meaningful anymore, for example. So you lose a lot of control with responsive, but it's on the flip side, it's a lot easier to maintain. Whereas with adaptive sites, if you are making a change, you have to make that change 3 or sometimes 6 times. So things to consider. Rule of thumb, if you have a website that's not mobile first, build an adaptive version of it. If you don't have a website and you're starting from scratch, start with a responsive design. Okay, moving on to tip number 8. Know your reason to be. This is understanding who is your customer. What are their needs? Which of their needs do you satisfy with your product? And why should they buy from you versus somebody else? And of course, I mean, with that, who is your competition? And if you do win from your competition, how will you maintain that advantage? It's a website design tip, but it's also just a general business tip, right? You should know your value proposition. And these are all components of that value proposition. Having all of these components noted down, and this is really important, write it down. Refer back to it often and on a regular basis, because this will help figure out what does your website design look like. And this is sort of the base layer of when we think about user experience design. User experience design, by the way, is a discipline in itself. And it's more than just, what color button should I use? Or what should my button say? Should it say shop now or buy now? That's really what we call the surface layer. The user experience design process starts with the strategy, which is, what is the objective of your website? This is sort of, the concept that needs to be considered before you do anything else, really. And all the questions that we asked in the previous slide help define the strategy. Once you've defined the strategy, next you want to figure out what's the scope, which is where do you draw the lines? What your website or your web experience really won't do everything. You don't want it to do everything. You want it to do what your reason to be is. So clearly delineating what the boundaries of the functionality you provide on your website is really, really important. Once you have that scope, next you want to go through the structure. So the structure is really about user journeys. How does your customer go from landing on your website to the desired outcome that you want them to walk away with? Things like, how many clicks does it take from somebody landing on your site to get the purchase? What does the post-purchase experience look like? All of these go into structures where all we're really doing is we're designing the journey. So start here, go here, here's 2 options, If they choose this option, what does that flow? If they choose this option, what's that flow look like? All of those. And then from that structure, you build what's called the skeleton. It's also called a wireframe in some areas or in some disciplines. It's a process of creating like essentially a functional blueprint of your website to see how everything connects. And you want to do this before you commit to building the thing in real life or in code. Once you have the structure, you do the surface, which is what a lot of people often say UI design is. It's not. UI design is so much more than the surface. The surface is just the look and feel, things that you can and likely should change on a regular basis. So this is things like, which images to use, what color scheme should you have, what does your what are the different pages look like? What is your navigation structure? All of those fall on the surface. Now, this is not my solve. This is something that was promoted by somebody by the name of Jesse James Garrett, who wrote what's often acknowledged as the definitive guide for UX design. It's called The Elements of User Experience. Very good book if you have a chance to read it. We'll hope to cover a lot of the concepts from this book when we go through the course that Sula was talking about earlier. That was a heavy one. Moving to something simpler. So my next tip is about simplifying the navigation on your website. You want to guide your customers through the journey on their website. Don't leave them to fend for themselves. Enable shortcuts. You've got your customers, you don't want them to jump through hoops. There will be some they'll need that extra convincing, but enabling shortcuts enables somebody to do one-click order. Amazon's really good at this, where if you have a login, if you've got all your payment data saved, it's buy now, one-click swipe, you're done, and you just wait at home to for your order to ship. You want to have that sort of frictionless journey available. But at the same time, you also want people that don't know what they want yet. You want to be able to guide them through that journey of like, why should they buy from you? How to use your product, things like that. And most importantly, don't let your customers get lost. Have a little home link at the top, so it's kind of acts as a North Star for if you do end up on a page, how do they go back to the last page? And you don't want them clicking the back button on the desktop or on the browser. You want them to be able to navigate back to where they came from or back to the home page at all times. So some rule of thumb pointers on simplifying navigation: have less than 7 items in a menu, unless you're a Walmart, in which case people expect you to have a lot more. But let's be honest, we're not building a Walmart type site here. Make sure the website, your page labels, your menu labels are descriptive. Have clear call to action buttons. What does the button do? Is it shop? Is it buy? There are different things. And that persistent navigation bar and home link that I just talked about. So that's the navigation side of things. Next up is, let's talk content. What goes on the website is just as important, in some ways, a lot more important really than what the structure of the website looks like. For this, first thing you want to think about is the balance of visuals versus text. It's easy to think of, let's put everything on the website. Let's explain everything. Let's write it whole down, big essay, because it's easy. You've done the work when you went through and built that strategy. You've written down all the reasons why customers should buy from you. Let's put it all on the website. But if you go with the old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words, you want to have a really good balance of visuals versus text. And when we think visuals, where possible, without compromising the speed of the website, you want to enable videos. Videos is also where a lot, like how we communicate is increasingly getting more motion driven. You just have to look at the growth of platforms like TikTok, which is entirely video, nothing but video, and it's exploding right now. And because of that, it's important to have videos on your website as well, because that's what people engage with. Good example of this, if you look at Canadian Tire websites recently, they've started adding, for the product photos, they've started adding videos that either is an instructional video on how to use the product, or it's a customer review of how to use of the product itself, or in some case, just a marketing video capture that shows what the product's about. Adding that additional layer gives you that edge that we were talking about. The next thing I want you guys to consider is adding newsletters or blogs to your website, a section that tells people why they should buy from you. Right? You sell the what? The product description, the videos that showcase the product. This is all the what. What are they buying? But explaining the why. How do you use the product? Well, the why and the how. Those are the questions your newsletter or your blog can answer. And it can also help convert those that are kind of on the edge of making a decision, helping that conversion with a newsletter or a blog can be very impactful for your website. The third piece I want you to consider from content is reviews. Enable these if you can. If a lot of the e-commerce templates available through the developers or the providers we looked at earlier, enable reviews. Look for that in your feature set. If you can, if you don't have reviews on the website itself, see if you can figure out a way to pull reviews from the manufacturer of the product. Just caution here, keep the reviews legitimate. While I was at Facebook, we used to support a number of e-commerce advertisers, and you'd be surprised how many just make up fake reviews. And it's not limited to just app reviews. So keep those reviews legitimate, keep them real, but have them. The next piece on content is showcasing your top products. What are the people buying most? And it's usually what most other people are going to want to buy too. So recognize which of your products are selling the most, showcase them up near the top. So remove some friction from the user's journey, easy for them to find what they're looking for. And the last piece is around enabling social sharing. So your best marketing tactic, your absolute best, cheapest, highest efficiency marketing tactic is a happy customer. Make it easy for your customer who's just scored a good deal to tell their friends about it, right? It's very easy to put in a plugin for Facebook to say, hey, share to Facebook or share to Instagram or wherever, and you should enable that. Doesn't take much. The output of that is actually well worth the effort that goes in. Okay, we've done about 5 topics. Are there any questions in the chat, Sula? Or should we keep going?
I don't see any. I think we can keep going.
Okay. All right, we'll keep going. Next, we're going to get into a bit of the heavy stuff now. So next piece is about organizing your products. So if you have just one product, life is easy, life is simple. But soon as you start getting into like 10, 12, 20, 50 products, you really need to start thinking about how people are able to find your products. There are 3 generally considered ways of organizing your product sets, like essentially filling in what describes a product. And these designs will all make sense on the next slide. I'm going to give you an example. Actually, let's just move to the example right away. So let's say you're selling an Adidas shoe, NMDR1, white, size 9.5, medium. Hierarchical set is a classification of the shoe that says it's a men's product, it's shoes, it's a walking shoe, it's Adidas branded, the model name is NMDR1, its color is white, its size is 9.5. All of these are hierarchical in that there is a separate branch for, let's say, NMDR2, or a separate branch for Nike or Reebok, or a separate branch altogether from shoes to apparel. Now, shoes is an easy example. What if we were looking at dress shoes, or let's say, a t-shirt, for example, an active wear t-shirt that is moisture wicking? Is that tops? Is that active wear? Is that, gym wear? There's different ways that it could go. So organizing your products in a hierarchy is great when your products follow a very simple, straightforward hierarchy where isn't as much overlap, and you have a small set of products. On the flip side, and I'll ask you guys to look at the right side of the screen here, is this idea of a matrix piece. So you've got that shoe and it's got these different identifiers. So size 9.5 has that shoe, but it's also got a number of different shoes in that same matrix, right? Men's, there is a number of products under men as well as category, for example, shoes here, or brand like Adidas. So if you were to just have a search set for Adidas, it would show up shoes as well as shirts and socks and whatever else Adidas sells. And then in the middle one is this idea of a flat structure where everything is at the same level. And it's got a bunch of different identifiers to say, for this shoe, for this SKU of the shoe, it aligns with men and unisex, because the shoe could work for women as well. It's category shoes because that's what it is, but its type could be a walking shoe or a casual shoe. Brand is Adidas because usually there's just one brand. Model name is just one, but colors could be, it could come in white or black or blue, and the different sizes it's available in. Based on the size of your product catalog, think about which structure works best for you. The flat structure that's in the middle there works really well if you have a really large product catalog, because there's so many different ways to categorize products. The flip side to that is you need a really strong and solid backbone to be able to search across and work through this flat structure. This is again where the first point we spoke about, the infrastructure, comes into play. The hierarchical model, as I mentioned earlier, that model works best for if you have like a small number, like let's say under 50 products that you can put into a clean structure. And when you're talking about like 50 to let's say about 500 or even 1,000 products, that's when you want to think about having a matrix structure to sort of organize how your products are labeled and how people can find products on your website. That was a lot. I need a sip of water. Tip number 4, expediate the second shop. It's a fancy way of saying you want to make it really, really easy for your customers to come back a second time. And how do you do that? Some tips on how to expediate are enabling that one-click persistent login. So log in with Facebook, log in with Amazon, log in with, actually, I don't think Amazon provides me, but log in with Google or Apple even now. Having that one-click persistent login allows you to sort of do this. Remember preferences, remember people's browsing history, know what people looked at, they added to cart but didn't check out. And you can surface those up for your customers the next time they visit your website. The other thing you also want to do is capture your email address. And since we're in Canada, you also need to capture their consent to send marketing email. This is Castle compliance. The downsides of Castle are many and large, so you do want to be very careful when you capture email and what you use your email addresses, your customer email addresses for, but you do want to capture that email so you can market to them. Next is enable, and this is part of the login piece, but encourage profile building. Encourage people to add in things like, what's their postal code? Are they men versus women? What's their size? Remember all of those so you can make much more personalized recommendations. And beyond recommendations, you want to make personalized offers. So if somebody's been on your website a few times, they haven't purchased something, or they've added something to cart but haven't made a purchase, maybe they're just waiting for a right deal. And sometimes the deal doesn't have to be big. It just needs to be just enough to tip them to conversion. So a personalized offer on a specific product, or like free shipping to a specific postal code, or a specific city, could be what expedites that second shop. Moving on to tip number 3. This is more at a macro level. You want to be able to measure everything that happens on your website. You want to track your customer journey. Where are the customers coming for? Like for everybody that lands on your website, what's the page they visit next? And how many of the people that visit that second page going to your third page and your fourth page, and so on and so forth. That's what we call a funnel, a website journey funnel. And understanding where the big drop-offs happen between one page to the next page, if there's a big drop-off, that should be an indicator for you to say something's not working here. What can we do to change that, versus relying on that, the initial user frame or user journey that we built in our UI design? The UI design, you should be able to also change it. Funnels, and understanding those funnels helps you do that. Cohorts is understanding where people are coming from and what their behavior is. So everybody that lands on your website on let's say an Apple device, how is their behavior different from somebody that comes in through a desktop? Is there a difference? And that understanding that difference can help you identify what changes you need to make on each of those platforms. Is your responsive design working? Does your adaptive design need a little tweak? You can further get into demographic breakdown. So if you go with a measurement tool like Facebook Analytics or Google Analytics, or even Adobe Omniture, it can give you some sense of demographic breakdown to say, people from Toronto, what is their behavior compared to people from Windsor or Ottawa or the West Coast, and different age groups and things like that. So understanding the demographic breakdowns allows you to, one, improve your website, but also heavily informs your marketing strategy. And then the last piece is segmentation. So following from the demographic breakdown, do you start building different experiences for people from different segments? So, for example, and this is feasible, if you have login behaviors, you can start building segments on people that have bought from a certain geography, have a different set of products made available to them versus other geographies. The other thing you would love to have, or it's amazing for you to have as a business leader, is a dashboard. What is your website doing? Where are the sales coming from? What is your daily sales limit? Have a real-time dashboard, and the measurement pieces that you put on the website enable that. And then the last piece is tag managers. Tag managers are little containers, that's what they call them, but they're small pieces of code that contain pixels that fire back to external sources. So here's an example. If you've ever wondered how Facebook or Google knows what you've been browsing at when you go on their website, and it's like, hey, I was just looking at that shoe on sportcheck.ca, and hey, I see that shoe again. That's enabled with these things called pixels that reside in tag managers. Putting a tag manager on your website allows you to heavily supercharge your marketing strategy, and allows you to, on the marketing side or advertising side, allow you to know where your website's converting, who's converting on your website, which ads are driving the most return, and so on and so forth. But it's not just about measurement, by the way. Like beyond measurement, you also want to be able to test everything. What you see here is a kind of a graph output that you would see from an A/B test, right? You can use A/B test to do things like improve customer flow. So think up a hypothesis to say, hey, or just tying back to the measurement piece we were just talking about, we find that people from Toronto react a different way to or buy different things. What you would, instead of just going ahead and making the change, you really want to be able to test to see if that hypothesis is correct. So you use tools like Adobe Target, AHA, there's a bunch of different tools available where you can change up part of the website and have both versions of your website live. And what these measurement tools do is randomly put 50% of your audience that lands on your website to get experience A, the other 50% gets experience B, and after a period of we'll say 1 or 2 weeks, or whenever you've got enough traffic, it tells you that, hey, well, version B of the website is actually performing so much better than version A. And then you can make the call from just looking at like a graph like this to say, hey, version A generally has a better performance. We should shift all our traffic to version A. But you want to be able to test that first versus essentially just going on gut feel alone. Next, and we're kind of towards the end here, you want to be able to remove friction. You need to remove friction. This is what will keep your customers on your website versus going to a competitor. So we talked about this, shorten the duration from click to conversion. Make that one-click buy available where it makes sense. Enable the on-platform customer service. We haven't spoken about this yet, but being able to chat with somebody live, or even having a chat bot to say things like, what are your shipping times like? Solutions are available for that, and we'll cover that. We'll cover sort of those external plugins in our course as well, but enabling on-platform customer service is very important to removing friction that your customer may see. Provide a very robust search functionality. Again, this goes down to the infrastructure piece, and we talked about search when we were looking at product sets as well. You need your customers to be able to find what they're looking for. Improve speed. This gets overlooked because it's so easy to think of all the cool things you can put on your website. But all of those things slow your website down. The biggest reason people don't buy stuff from a website is because they don't stick around long enough to know what there is to buy. The website takes too long to load. If it takes more than a few seconds, you've already lost that customer. So whatever you can do to improve speed, you should. While, of course, you still want there to be a website. You just don't want an empty page, because that is super fast. Jokes aside, though, this is also where the dashboards that we talked about earlier will be very helpful in understanding where our speed is, and if the changes we're making have made an impact on our speeds. And then the very last piece is connecting the dots. Connect your site experience with marketing. We talked about how the website's role is to meet those expectations that marketing sets. A big part of meeting those expectations is making sure that there is a seamless transition between what marketing's telling the customer versus what the customer actually sees when they land on your website. That needs to be really, really tight. Tip number 1, and this is sort of the biggest one, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep your website focused. Keep your website clear. You got to keep it easy to understand. If it gets too complicated, you've lost your customer. Use all the available tools. All the infrastructure pieces, all the providers we covered earlier, they make a lot of tools available to you. Don't get caught up in needing to code. You don't need to code to be able to use these tools. The whole point of these tools is being able to use them without being able to code. We will cover a little bit of coding in our course as well, but generally speaking, you should be able to get really solid response just by using all the tools that people like Shopify and WordPress and Wix have made available. And learn from others' mistakes and your own, of course, but look at the websites that you do go to for your own shopping. What doesn't work for them likely won't work for you either. So try to avoid the mistakes that or the frustrations that you experience on your on others' websites or other providers' websites, and avoid those. Kind of common sense, easy to miss it though. Very last piece before we go, I've got a little bonus tip for you on top of the 10. Ensure your posterior is protected. Always, always, always make sure it's covered. And this is like ensuring you have a privacy policy on your website. Have a terms and conditions page. Ensure that there is security, like this is the infrastructure piece. So ensure that they have sufficient safeguards in place from hacking or illegal use of your website. And then on the business side of things, have insurance, get legal advice. The last two aren't specifically website, but they're very, very important to ensure that your website stays up and stays functioning. Privacy policy, terms and conditions, those are the two things that you do need on your website. And with that, love to open the floor up to Q&A.
Oh, we have a question here. What is the best e-commerce platform to use? Shopify, Etsy, etc.
I don't know if I'm in a position to make that recommendation. Etsy is more of a marketplace. I just want to call that out. So you sort of sell on the Etsy marketplace. I don't believe you actually create your own Etsy platform unless things have changed. Shopify generally is considered full-featured. They've made a lot of investments in that space, and they're a Canadian company, so I'm a little bit biased towards them that way. But BigCommerce, WooCommerce, Wix, they all provide pretty much the same functionality. If you held a gun to my head, I would probably suggest Shopify.
Okay, great question. Great question, Sue. Thank you. Any other questions? Is the tagging something that you would cover in the course?
Yes, we will go over some of like how to set up a tag manager and what are some of the common tags we should put on.
Awesome. Okay, so doesn't look like we have any more questions for today. So I just wanted to thank Navneet for sharing his insightful thoughts and so many great tips. I have put the full bio in the chat, and also it is on our website. But if you would like to learn more, we have a full class starting on Thursday, August 12th, so this Thursday, and it's weekly Thursday nights. You can email us. So if you dialed in today and do have questions and like a copy of the presentation, our email is continue@uwindsor.ca, or check us out on our website listed here, continue.uwindsor.ca. And our classes are very interactive and hands-on. For the purposes of today, it was more informational. However, our classes do have like assignments, so you'll be working on your own website in a group or individually, depending. And it goes a little bit deeper. So the class will cover channels for online sales, creating website for UX design principles, especially keeping them in mind the customer journey, how to edit and debug HTML, CSS programming, so basics on that, and understand what those roles really, the role of those languages in the website. And looking at technologies for your website, automations, third-party plugins, chat box. So what is available and what really works? And looking at web development platforms, like we just mentioned, and which one is best and why for you or for which business. Okay. Do you have anything else to add, Navneet?
No, I think you covered. That was good cover. Yeah, good explanation. Everything we spoke about today, we will cover to a much deeper extent and much more. So like we didn't talk about coding at all today, but we will cover a little bit of that. We will have a review of not just your website, but also understanding like what different sales channels beyond just the website as well. So I'm hoping that you join. Um, I'll look forward to chatting with you as or as many of you that can join in a week from today.
Okay, so yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to just reach out to us. We're going to wrap it up for today. So just thanks again for sharing your lunch with us and have a good afternoon.